The serial killer babysitter. We've all seen the horror movies and heard the scary stories, but the crimes we're talking about today actually happened. 5 children died after being left with the same babysitter. At least one doctor reportedly tried to warn police, but that warning simply disappeared. Tonight, we're going into one of Florida's most disturbing and overlooked cases. A case built around a teenage babysitter, a trail of dead children, and a pattern that was visible only after it was far too late. Her name is Christine Falling. She was not some stranger lurking outside a family home. She was someone that parents invited in, someone they trusted with bottles and blankets, cribs, and their own sleeping children. According to investigators, she became responsible for the deaths of children who could not protect themselves or tell anyone what happened. This is the story of Christine Falling, the woman later known as Florida's killer babysitter. I'm Tim, and this is True Crime Unchained. Christine Laverne Falling was born into severe poverty in Florida. Her last name at birth was Slaughter, but she was adopted by the Falling family when she was young. It seems like the last name Slaughter was more fitting. Accounts describe an unstable childhood marked by family conflict and time spent in orphanages. Reports also say she had epilepsy and was considered intellectually disabled. As a teenager, she experienced repeated medical and psychological crises. Over a 2-year period, she was hospitalized dozens of times. Doctors allegedly struggled to find a physical cause for many of her complaints. She later described hallucinations and disturbing visual experiences, and by age 16, she was considered medically incapacitated. None of that predicts murder, and none of it excuses murder. It might remind you of a particular case in the news right now where a mother that killed her kids is claiming mental health issues. Look, I'm sorry, but murdering kids is just wrong, and you're not going to convince me otherwise. Most people dealing with trauma, disability, epilepsy, or mental health struggles never harm anyone. But Christine Falling's instability was already apparent to people around her. And despite that, she began earning money babysitting for neighbors, friends, and relatives. Parents placed their children in her care, and soon, children began dying. The first death central to this case was 2-year-old Cassidy Muffin Johnson. In February of 1980, Cassidy was taken to a doctor's office in Bluntstone, Florida. She had reportedly been diagnosed with encephalitis. But a few days later, on February 28th, Cassidy was dead. An autopsy listed blunt force trauma to the skull as the cause of death. Christine Falling had been babysitting Cassidy. Falling reportedly claimed the child had passed out and fallen from her crib. Now I'm thinking about it, maybe Falling is an appropriate last name for this bitch. The attending physician reportedly didn't believe her, and according to later reporting, the doctor wrote a note recommending that police investigate the babysitter, Falling. But that note was reportedly lost, and the case was closed. So let's think about that for a moment. A doctor allegedly saw enough to recommend an investigation, but the warning didn't lead to any sort of intervention. And if that account is accurate, it raises a question that would haunt this entire case. Could later deaths have been prevented if the warning had not disappeared? After Cassidy Johnson's death, Falling moved to Lakeland, Florida. 2 months later, another child died while under her supervision. His name was Jeffrey Davis. Jeffrey was only 4 years old, and his autopsy pointed to myocarditis. It's a heart condition as the cause of death. So the death was treated as natural. But then came a detail that's almost impossible to process. 3 days after Jeffrey's death, During the time of his funeral, Christine Falling was asked to watch Jeffrey's 2-year-old cousin, Joseph Spring. Within hours, Joseph was dead. Doctors attributed Joseph's death to a viral infection, and they also believe the infection might explain Jeffrey's death. 2 children from the same family circle had died within days of one another, and both had been in the care of Christine Falling. At the time, it looked like a horrific family misfortune, but later it would look very different. In July of 1981, Christine Falling left Lakeland and returned to Perry, Florida. Reports say fewer families were willing to trust her with their children by then. So she began doing work as a housekeeper and caregiver for elderly people. One of the people she cared for was 77-year-old William Swindle. According to later accounts, Swindle died in his kitchen on the very first day Falling cared for him. No murder charge was brought in this case, and it's important not to call it a proven homicide. But in the broader timeline of deaths surrounding Christine Falling, it is kind of a disturbing detail. A child had died, then another child, and then another, and now all of a sudden an elderly man died on her first day of caregiving work. It's the kind of fact that may not prove a crime by itself, but it makes the larger pattern just impossible to ignore. Later that year, another infant died. The child was 8-month-old Jennifer Daniels. Jennifer was the daughter of Falling's half-sister. According to accounts of the case, Jennifer's mother briefly left her with Falling while she went into a supermarket. The baby was reportedly left in the car with Christine for only a short time when Jennifer stopped breathing. The death was initially suspected to be sudden infant death syndrome. Again, there was no immediate murder charge. There was an explanation that could make the tragedy seem natural. And again, Christine Falling was the person left alone with the child. Jennifer Dials would later become one of the 3 children whose murders Falling admitted to in court. Before we continue with this story, let's talk about something a little lighter. Today's episode is brought to you by Giggles on Garment, my very own t-shirt company. I designed them myself. They're great for a laugh or a conversation starter. Get yours today. Then came 10-week-old Travis Dwayne Coleman. On July 2nd, 1982, Travis was in Christine Falling's care in Blountstown. The infant had recently been ill, and that gave people an easy possible explanation if something went wrong. A sick baby, a fragile baby, a sudden death. But Travis's death did not look right to the people who examined him. At the autopsy, doctors found internal injuries. Those injuries pointed away from a natural death. They indicated deliberate suffocation. And this was the turning point. Authorities could no longer treat the death as another unexplained tragedy. They began looking at Christine Falling, and then they began looking backward at Cassidy Johnson, at Jeffrey Davis, at Joseph Spring, at Jennifer Daniels. And for the first time, law enforcement was no longer examining one child's death. They were examining a pattern. When police finally confronted Christine Falling, she reportedly confessed to killing children in her care. She admitted to murdering Cassidy Johnson, Jennifer Daniels, and Travis Coleman. Accounts of her confession also connected her to the deaths of Jeffrey Davis and Joseph Spring, but Falling was never prosecuted for those 2 deaths. According to reports, Falling said she heard voices telling her, "Kill the baby." She reportedly described suffocating children with pillows and blankets. Other accounts describe choking or strangulation. These details are fucking horrifying because of the vulnerability of the victims. They were babies, they were toddlers, they were very young children, or possibly someone elderly. They couldn't name the person who hurt them. They couldn't explain what happened, and in several instances, their deaths were initially explained by illness, infection, or sudden infant death. For the families, the truth wasn't just devastating, it was complete and utter fucking betrayal. They trusted Christine Falling, and according to her own admissions, that trust became the opportunity for murder. In December of 1982, Falling pleaded guilty to 3 murders. She pled guilty to Cassidy Johnson, Jennifer Daniels, and Travis Coleman. She received 3 sentences of life in prison. Those sentences were imposed concurrently. That means that all 3 life sentences are served at the same time, not one after another. Her plea and confession also meant prosecutors didn't pursue the death penalty. The state didn't prosecute Falling for the deaths of Jeffrey Davis or Joseph Spring, so to be precise, Falling was convicted of 3 murders. The other deaths remain unprosecuted, and William Swindle's death was never charged as murder. But for the families and communities touched by the case, the legal categories don't erase the pattern. The same caregiver was present, and babies died. Christine Falling remains eligible for parole because her murders happened under Florida's older sentencing laws. The crime occurred from 1980 through 82. At that time, people given life sentences in Florida could still become eligible for parole review. Florida later abolished parole for most people convicted of crimes committed after October 1st, 1983, but Christine Falling's conviction came before that cutoff. That means she remains under the old system. Parole eligibility does not mean automatic release. It doesn't mean she served a short sentence, and it doesn't mean that the parole board believes she should be free. It means the Florida Commission on Offender Review can periodically decide whether her release would be appropriate. After serving about 25 years, Falling became eligible for consideration. In November 2017, she was denied parole. Reports from that hearing said no one appeared to speak in support of her release, and she remains imprisoned at Lowell Correction Institution in Ocala, Florida. The parole process is a legal reality, but for the victims' families, it reopens a nightmare. Every review forces them to confront the same question. Could the woman who admitted to killing children ever walk free? The haunting question in this case is not just why Christine Falling killed. There's no answer that makes that understandable. The other question is why she wasn't stopped earlier. A child died with skull trauma, a physician urged police to investigate, and the warning was lost. Then a 4-year-old boy died. 3 days later, his 2-year-old cousin died. Then an infant died, and then another infant died. One death may be tragedy. 2 deaths may raise suspicions, but several deaths around the same caregiver should force people to ask hard questions. The case of Christine Falling shows exactly how easily separate tragedies can hide in a single perpetrator. Different towns, different families, different medical explanations, different fucking doctors. And one common connection that wasn't recognized in time. Christine fucking Falling. Christine Falling's story is terrifying because it began with something ordinary: a babysitter watching kids, a relative helping with an infant, a caregiver looking after a neighbor. The people around her saw someone available to help. They didn't see the danger. And for years, every death came with an explanation: illness, a fall, a virus, sudden infant death, just plain bad luck. Until Travis Coleman's autopsy forced investigators to look closer. And once they did, the pattern emerged. Christine Falling pleaded guilty to murdering 3 children: Cassidy Johnson, Jennifer Daniels, and Travis Coleman. She was sentenced to 3 concurrent life terms. Again, she remains eligible for parole under the old Florida system, but her parole request was denied in 2017. She remains incarcerated. 5 children died after being left with the same babysitter, and one morning, if it truly was lost, may have been the first missed chance to stop it. Well, guys, that's what I have on this case. I really appreciate you all listening. If this episode stayed with you, follow the show and share it with someone who loves true crime. Join me next time. Until then, stay aware, stay questioning, and never forget, sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one that everyone trusted. This has been True Crime Unchained. I'm Tim, filming from Southwest Florida. Peace.